Hello, everybody. Today we have with us Thomas Neubauer. Let me begin with his introduction. Thomas is the VP of Business Development and Innovations at Tioco, and also the co-creator of Airborne RF. Thomas has about 20 years of experience in the management of wireless network, working with Tier 1 customers all across the globe. On behalf of GSMA and Global UTM Association, he leads the worldwide standardization of interfaces between cellular networks and the aviation ecosystem. He also holds a PhD in telecommunications engineering. Welcome, Thomas. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Today Thomas will be talking to us regarding all the concerns and confusion around the recent directive issued by the government of India to the telecom operators, asking them to refrain from installing 5G base stations near in the C-band near airports within a specified perimeter of the runways at the airports, and much more. So without further delay, let's get into the questions, Thomas. Like I see in India, the 5G is hitting the mainstream in full swing. So what I would like to understand here is, in terms of leading the global race in 5G innovation, the situation of 5G technology around the world is what I would like to understand from your view.
Sure. So with 5G, we see the first wave of 5G deployments at scale. That is so-called 5G non-standalone, which means that it is actually based on a core technology in the radio core that is based on LTE, so 4G, and that has some limitations. We, however, see already a second phase coming in where there is some first deployments of 5G standalone, which will provide some very advanced capabilities where that will bring additional benefits to specific user groups, customers, and business opportunities. But generally speaking, 5G is actually coming in big time, and it's across the world. So we see that from Africa, Asia, North America, Europe. The most deployments today we have in Europe. That is because of the nature of how Europe is built out. But we see operational networks around the globe already with a strong drive towards services being handled by 5G.
Right. So just to begin with, before we start talking about everything else, if you could just help the audience who's not very aware of the technicalities, just if you could help them understand what really is C-band and what does it mean for 5G?
Right. So C-band is actually just a frequency band that is deployed around the globe in the frequency range between about 3.1 to about 4 gigahertz. So it's a frequency band that is actually allocated and it is used for 5G. And that's as simple as it gets.
Right. So this brings me to this, we have seen in the past that 5G in the C-band was being deployed near the airports, which had sparked protests by the aviation industry, wherein some airlines had raised this issue that this was creating a problem with the flight's altimeters. Is there any truth to these claims? If you would.
So first of all, we need to explain what that is. What does it mean, and what is influencing what? And who is actually guilty of, why is this a problem? So the general aspect is that this C-band is a new frequency band that has not been used for cellular in the past. So, and now with 5G, national authorities are clearing that band and have sold that spectrum or licensed that spectrum to telecom operators so that they can deploy new 5G service, because the demand for capacity grows continuously. And that is a new band that is actually quite attractive. That is on the telecom side.
Right.
On the aviation side, the aviation band, the frequency band between 4.2 and 4.4 gigahertz has globally been used for a technology that is called the altimeter radar. What that means is there is a radar sitting on the aircraft that is actually sending a signal down and receives a reflection of that signal. And because of that, it can measure the altimeter of, or it can measure the altitude of the aircraft. Why is that important? If you have bad weather conditions or fog or whatever, you have those systems supporting the pilots to actually identify what altitude you are. Because if you don't see, the ground, you must have systems that do that. And those altimeters have been in the aircraft like forever.
Right.
The problem is that these altimeters, because they have been there like forever, working essentially in isolation, the filters of these radars, so the filters means just, how much energy are you collecting from only this band, but also wider bands.
Right.
Those filters are actually pretty bad, because there was never a necessity to make it very good, because there was no signal surrounding anyway. But now the aviation or the telecom authorities, the frequency authorities, have issued now the spectrum that is close to this altimeter band to the telecom systems. And it has nothing to do per se with 5G at all.
Right.
It could be, if it's 4G, even if you would do 2G in those frequency bands, the challenge is that the altimeter radar filters, because they are pretty bad by modern standards, they are collecting energy from these other bands. And that actually causes a problem for these altimeter radars, because they are getting a lot, or potentially getting a lot, of false information. And that can lead to the fact that they are receiving signals or getting signals that are generating incorrect altimeters information. And that is the problem. So what happens is, and we have seen evidence that if your frequency is or your signals are working very close to the frequency bands of the altimeter radar, the filters are collecting data from the network, which is a mistake by the altimeter radars. And because of that, they are showing incorrect altitudes, and that is a safety risk.
Right. Thank you for making it so clear. I hope the audience is able to understand whatever you said, because that's you put it in very simple language. A lot of us are just with this confusion, how does it work, and why has this been sent out that they cannot deploy 5G. But you're talking about the altimeter filters here, what it gets me to is that there's disruption risk that is there will gradually reduce with time once these altimeters are checked and replaced. But what I would want to understand here is the aviation industry is on one hand scrambling to contain this risk, this operational risk. So what about the telecommunications operators here? What role do they play in this whole process?
Right. So this is a very important point, because aviation says, hey, now 5G and the telecoms, they are doing something bad to us, right? I'll leave that for a second.
Right.
The telecom people say, well, actually, we're not doing anything bad for us, because we are only using the frequency bands we are getting the allowance. And we are not emitting or transmitting any signal outside of the frequency bands that have been cleared for us, that we are paying money for.
Right.
So the aviation people therefore say, okay, well, it has not been a problem before as long as you didn't use it, that spectrum. But the telecoms say, well, it's not our problem that you have such bad filters.
All right.
So it's this, in reality, as you say, in reality, what will happen long term is there will be changes to the filters of the altimeter radar. But as we know in anything in aviation industry, that is a long process. You cannot switch that overnight.
Right.
And so that will take time. The biggest challenge that we have out there today is that people don't know. They have an opinion, but they're not building their opinion on facts.
Right.
They're building it on, oh, somebody said. And they're building it on let's stop 5G within 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. Who tells them what is the right number? They do not have the facts. It's entirely based on opinion. And that is the problem. You cannot, an opinion is never right or wrong. What we are suggesting and what should be done is actually to have fact-based insights, because telecom operators know exactly how their infrastructure is working. And for example, we are providing software solutions that allow exactly the computation of how much energy is actually moving or collected by the filters based on the build out of the radio network, of the 5G or 4G network. 5G in that case, because this C-band is only for 5G. So what you could do is you could actually measure and compute and remove the opinion with a fact. And subject to each and every airport, you can automate that process as new 5G sites will be deployed to say, okay, which sites do actually show a risk and which ones do not. And with that, you would just remove the opinion and the fear with the fact of what is out there, measure it, get evidence, and with this evidence, actually put actions in place with the safety margins that aviation systems require to make sure that there's no safety risk, and at the same time, the blaming stops, because there's this both side blaming based on opinions, not on facts.
Right. So talking of problems here, Thomas, I would want to know this recent directive that the government of India has sent out to the telecom operators also asks them to refrain from deploying 5G in the C-band near the airports. But looking at it, what I can think of is that this is not a permanent solution. This is just delaying the problem. So what, according to you, can be a more long-standing and a stable solution to this?
So there are 2 points. The decision at this point is entirely based on opinions, not on facts. Fact-based would be the next step, so that you actually evaluate for based on the existing spectrum, based on the existing build-outs, because the topology also plays a critical role. If you have, some surrounding hills, it could be that a cell that is further away than the current guard band or guard distance actually provides. So we should do that based on facts to say and evaluate, is there a risk? Quantify it, identify, and if there is one, eliminate it. If there is no risk, stop whining about it.
Right.
That is the short-term aspect. The long-term aspect will for sure be that the airliners will step by step remove the altimeter radars with more modern ones that have appropriate filter bands and guard bands. But that is, we're talking here about at least 5 years plus.
5 years plus. All right. So, talking about facts, Thomas, going ahead with facts, there's something else that I would want to stress on. Like there's this concern that has been going, like since you're stressing so much on facts and not just hearing something and passing it on as information, there is a lot of concern regarding human health hazards also related to 5G. Like there's this view that people have that this increased radio frequency fields, like especially above 6 gigahertz, especially for the 5G mobiles, causes health hazards to human health, like could be dangerous. So like, is there any truth, like is it true that 5G produces higher exposure to RF fields than, like, compared to other mobile technologies?
So I think this fear of, RF exposure to human people exists as long as we have mobile networks. And it just exchanges the 2G with 3G, with 4G, with 5G. And spectrum use has always gone up, and the energy that is transmitted has always gone down. So what you have, there have been studies, or there are ongoing studies all the time. We have at the moment, I think we have about 6 billion global SIM card users or more, where there has not been evidence that there is any risk that is for any average use. And for example, I'm an intensive user. I'm not worried about it. There's no scientific evidence, and scientific evidence is you need to do double-blinded tests on is there an impact. There is no evidence that there is an obvious risk with the guards and with the limits that have been imposed by the World Health Organization. And those limits are actually continuously going down. And we see that with the deployments of 5G, what happens is the exposure from the cell tower is actually added up. So it's not just about the 5G, but the exposure of the cell tower is actually added up, and there are limits to the accumulated power that is allowed to be transmitted. So if you have now 5G, it's actually something else will be turned off so that the accumulated total energy that is transmitted does not exceed the limits that are defined by World Health Organizations and others. And some municipalities have even further reduced that. So it's, I would say, there's no safety concern. And I've not seen any scientifically proven evidence that there is a safety risk. Again, there's a lot of fear, and there is people are worried about, but that is as long as we have mobile networks.
Right. That is more than enough. That is exactly the clarification I guess most of us need at this point. In the end, Thomas, like we were talking about the blame game earlier, I would want to know, like, for now, since 5G deployment near the airports has been postponed, what, in your view, could be a joint solution? Like, how can the aviation and the telecom industry work together for a joint solution to this?
Yeah. So what we have seen working in other places is, transparency. Transparency fights fears and opinions, and based on transparency and data exchange and information exchange, we can base the discussion on evidence and facts. Right. So, and there's solutions out there that allow, for example, the telecom companies to compute the impact onto or the potential impact onto an altimeter radar. And that information can actually be exchanged with the aviation and safety authorities, as well as the authorities who are issuing the spectrum, so that there is these three components, and moving that discussion from the opinion-based to the fact-based insights is the first step and the most important one. And based on these facts and evidence, there's capabilities to have a good discussion and a solution.
Right.
And at TIOCO, we have solutions that allow airliners and mobile network operators to exchange that information.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Thomas. That was such an insightful session. I guess a lot of queries have been answered here. A lot of fears have been clarified here. Thank you so much for taking out time to talk to us. It was really, really nice talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Thomas.